Black billionaire forgets $100,000 suitcase, but a poor waitress brings it back. What if a forgotten suitcase, left behind by a billionaire, held not just money, but the key to redemption for two people from entirely different worlds? Jordan Brooks leaned back in the leather seat of his private jet, the hum of the engines a familiar lullaby. At 42, he was the picture of success. Tailored suit, Rolex glinting on his wrist, and a real estate empire that stretched across continents. His name adorned skyscrapers, his face graced magazine covers, and his wealth, $4.2 billion and counting, made him untouchable. But as the jet soared over New York City, Jordan's gaze lingered on the skyline, not with pride, but with a hollow ache. He'd grown up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, where the air smelled of asphalt and desperation. His mother, Loretta, had scrubbed floors and worked double shifts to keep food on the table. Her hands, calloused and cracked, were the foundation of his ambition. "You're gonna be somebody, Jordan," she'd say, her voice a mix of exhaustion and fire. She'd died when he was 19, just as he'd started to climb. Now, her memory was a ghost that haunted his penthouse, a reminder of the roots he'd buried beneath glass towers and boardroom deals. Jordan's phone buzzed, a text from his assistant about a misplaced suitcase at JFK. He frowned, recalling the black Rimawa he'd left at the gate in his rush. It held $100,000 in cash for a discreet business deal and documents he couldn't afford to lose. "Handle it," he typed back, but unease gnawed at him. He'd built his empire on control, yet here he was, slipping. Sarah Matthews wiped sweat from her brow as she balanced a tray of coffee cups at the diner. At 29, her life was a treadmill of double shifts, waitressing by day, bartending by night. Her apartment in the Bronx was a shoebox, its walls thin enough to hear her neighbors' arguments. Debt clung to her like damp clothes, $30,000 in student loans, $15,000 in medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment. Her mother, Diane, had passed 6 months ago, leaving Sarah with a void no paycheck could fill. Diane had been her anchor, a woman who'd worked as a maid for years, always with a smile despite the grind. "Keep your head up, baby," she'd say. "The world's tough, but you're tougher." Sarah clung to those words, but lately, they felt like a taunt. Her brother, Marcus, was in jail, and her younger sister, Kayla, was crashing on her couch, dreaming of college but drowning in the same financial quicksand. That evening, Sarah was at JFK, picking up extra hours cleaning rental cars. Exhausted, she sat near gate 17, waiting for a delayed bus home. That's when she saw it. The suitcase, sleek and out of place, like a diamond in a junkyard. Her heart thudded. She glanced around. No one was watching. She could take it, disappear into the crowd. But Diane's voice echoed in her mind, "Do right, even when it hurts." With a shaky breath, Sarah dragged the suitcase to airport security, her hands trembling as she handed it over. Jordan's assistant tracked down the suitcase the next day. It was intact, cash and documents untouched, thanks to a waitress named Sarah Matthews. Intrigued, Jordan requested a meeting. He wasn't sure why, gratitude, curiosity, or maybe a need to feel something real. His life was a carousel of sycophants and contracts. Maybe this woman, who'd chosen honesty over a fortune, was a glimpse of something he'd lost. They met at a quiet cafe in Manhattan. Sarah arrived in her diner uniform, her braids pulled back, her eyes wary. Jordan, in a $5,000 suit, felt oddly out of place. "You could have taken the money," he said, leaning forward. "Why didn't you?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Because it wasn't mine. And I know what it's like to lose something you can't replace." Her voice cracked, betraying the weight of her mother's death. Jordan nodded, recognizing that pain. He thanked her with a check for $10,000, a gesture that felt hollow to him but overwhelming to her. They talked for hours, an unlikely pair. Sarah spoke of her mother's pride, her brother's mistakes, her sister's dreams. Jordan shared fragments of his own story. Brownsville, his mother's sacrifices, the guilt of outrunning his past. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a billionaire, but as a man still tethered to a boy from the projects. Over the next few weeks, they met again. First by chance, then by choice. Sarah invited Jordan to her diner, where he ate greasy eggs and laughed at her quick wit. He invited her to his office, a glass fortress overlooking Central Park. She was awed but unimpressed, her groundedness a stark contrast to his polished world. One evening, Sarah mentioned her mother's old job as a maid for a real estate firm. Jordan froze. "What was the company?" he asked, his voice tight. Sarah named Brooks Enterprises, his company. Her mother, Diane Matthews, had cleaned their offices for years. Jordan's mind reeled. He'd never noticed the cleaners, never thought to. The realization hit like a punch. Sarah's mother had been invisible to him, just another worker in the machine he'd built. Sarah, too, was shaken. She remembered her mother's stories of long nights, of bosses who never looked her in the eye. "She worked for you," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "And you didn't even know her name." Jordan had no defense. The guilt he'd buried, about his mother, his roots, his empire's cost, resurfaced, raw and unrelenting. Sarah's discovery about her mother wasn't the only shock. One night, while helping Jordan sort through old files at his penthouse, she stumbled on copies of the documents from the Suitcase. They weren't just contracts, they detailed shady deals, bribes to city officials, falsified permits, and land grabs that displaced low-income families. Brooks Enterprises, Jordan's pride, was built on corruption. Sarah confronted him, her voice trembling with anger. "This is why people like me can't get ahead. You push us out, take our homes, and call it progress." Jordan's face crumpled. He'd known about the deals, had signed off on them, convincing himself it was just business. But seeing Sarah's pain, her mother's pain, mirrored in her eyes, made it personal. He tried to explain. "I didn't start out like this. I wanted to build something for people like us, from places like Brownsville. But somewhere along the way, I lost it." Sarah wasn't swayed. "You lost it because you stopped looking back," she said. "You forgot where you came from." The documents were a ticking bomb. A whistleblower had already leaked hints to the press, and Jordan's board was scrambling. He faced a choice: cover it up as he'd done for years, or come clean and risk everything: his wealth, his reputation, his empire. Sarah, too, was at a crossroads. She could walk away, keep the $10,000, and protect herself. Or she could push Jordan to do the right thing, even if it meant exposing her mother's old employer and stirring up her own pain. One night, at Sarah's apartment, they argued. Kayla, her sister, overheard, her eyes wide with hope and fear. "You always tell me to fight for what's right," Kayla said. "So why are you hesitating?" Sarah looked at Jordan, her resolve hardening. "If you don't fix this, I will." Jordan spent a sleepless night in his penthouse, staring at a photo of his mother. He saw her hands, her tired smile, and heard her voice. "Be somebody. Not a billionaire, but a man who made things right." The next morning, he called a press conference. Flanked by Sarah, he admitted to the company's wrongdoings, announced his resignation as CEO, and pledged to cooperate with investigations. The room erupted, cameras flashing, but Jordan felt lighter than he had in years. The fallout was brutal. Brooks Enterprises' stock plummeted, and Jordan's fortune took a hit. But he didn't retreat. He liquidated assets to fund a new initiative, the Loretta Brooks Foundation, named for his mother. Its mission was to provide affordable housing and job training for communities like the one he'd grown up in. He asked Sarah to lead it. Sarah hesitated. She wasn't a CEO, she was a waitress with a high school diploma and a mountain of debt. But Jordan saw what she couldn't: her resilience, her integrity, her ability to inspire. "You're the one who reminded me who I am," he told her. "You can do this." With Kayla's encouragement, Sarah accepted. She enrolled in night classes, learning business and management, while spearheading the foundation's first project, a community center in the Bronx, built on land once targeted for a luxury high-rise. Jordan worked alongside her, not as a boss, but as a partner, rolling up his sleeves to meet tenants, listen to their stories, and rebuild trust. Their bond grew, not into romance, but into something deeper, a shared purpose. Sarah found her voice, advocating for people like her mother, who'd been invisible for too long. Jordan found redemption, not in wealth, but in giving back. One evening, at the community center's opening, Sarah spoke to a crowd of families, her voice steady. "This is for my mom," she said, tears in her eyes. "And for all of us who keep going, no matter what." Jordan watched from the sidelines, a quiet pride in his chest. He'd lost billions, but he'd gained something he hadn't felt since Brownsville, a sense of home. The suitcase, once a symbol of greed, became a turning point. Sarah's decision to return it sparked a chain of events that reshaped 2 lives and countless others. The Loretta Brooks Foundation grew, with Sarah at its helm, her sister Kayla studying architecture to design homes for the future. Jordan, no longer a billionaire but still wealthy, became a mentor to young entrepreneurs from underserved communities, his mother's legacy alive in every step. As the sun set over the Bronx, Sarah and Jordan stood on the community center's rooftop, the city sprawling before them. "You think she'd be proud?" Sarah asked, meaning her mother. Jordan smiled, thinking of his own. They both would. The skyline glittered, not with towers of glass, but with the promise of second chances.